Hi everyone, it's Elsie, editor for World Aviation Festival, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Paul van Alphen, the managing director of Up in the Air. Lovely to have us with us. Lovely to have you with us here today, Paul. So Paul is going to be one of the moderators on our payments tracks at Aviation Festival Americas coming up in Miami in early June. So ahead of the event, I thought it'd be good to tap your thoughts a bit on what's happening in the payments landscape in aviation and preview a bit some of the topics that we're going to be discussing at the event. So just to kick us off in that regard, as a sort of start question, what is unique about the payments landscape in the Americas, and how do you think the aviation industry needs to evolve to meet the sort of diverse customer preferences across these markets?
Yeah, thank you, Elsie, and good to join you, and also for the Aviation Festival Americas in June. Yeah, so there's not a single payment culture in the Americas. Americas obviously have North, Central, South, and payment behavior typically differs, by culture. And in North America, Canada, and the US, you see that credit is still very strong, credit cards, but also buy now, pay later. And if you move more south into, let's say, Central Caribbean and also Latin America, you see it's much more fragmented. There is a strong growth of PIX in Brazil, account to account, but there's also tickets that are paid by cash, at shops, for instance. You also see installments, people paying with their card over time, like in 6 or 12 installments. So it differs very much. And next to that, where obviously the US is a huge domestic market, single market. The rest of the Americas are very fragmented also from by country, by culture, but also, for instance, by the payment providers that are active in those individual countries, and also the regulations that play a role in these individual countries. So it's a very diverse landscape, and it makes it very difficult for airlines that fly to a number of destinations in the region to have a really overarching payment strategy that will help them, streamline the processes and maximize their conversion.
Well, sort of talk a bit more about the strategy there. Aviation has obviously a historic dependence on legacy technology, but when it comes to payments and, I say, covering and serving customers across these different markets, what do you think the industry could learn from other sectors in the Americas?
Yeah, first of all, that's always a difficult one, because airlines travel in general is so unique when it comes to the characteristics of payments. If it's the prepayment, the deferred delivery, you book now, you pay now for something that you will consume at a later stage. The fraud levels, the fact that it's cross-border, the average transaction values are quite different compared to, for instance, retail or digital goods or other forms of services that are sold online, for instance. Typically, the benchmark would be like an Uber or like Amazon, where you have frictionless payments, where your card details are stored, and you basically check out with either one click, or with Uber without any action at all. That is obviously something that the airline industry would like to do as well, but they would then have to invest more in tokenization and a card on file solution, which also opens up potential data breaches. So there's always a balance there between the customer experience, but also with obviously the operational side of it, but also the security side of it, on how to best manage that. But yeah, there are definitely best practices out there that the industry could learn from, and that's always a good position to take.
You segued nicely to my next question, which was sort of covering cybersecurity. So obviously airlines are more keen to integrate technology into their payments processes, but that comes with risk. So in terms of sort of combating fraud and strengthening cybersecurity strategies, what can airlines do here? Where should they be looking to sort of shore up their defenses in this regard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think since airlines started to sell online, probably late 90s, early 2000s, obviously fraudsters have also identified this as an opportunity, and there's always a challenge to stay, maybe not ahead of the fraudsters, because that's very difficult, but also keep in touch with them and make sure that you find a balance between, I would say, stopping the bad guys, letting the good guys through. You want to avoid false positives, where you basically block a transaction which is valid, legit. But there's also a lot of activity, on the fraudster side now, also with AI, and where you see that airlines, they leverage fraud solutions that also make use of machine learning and AI. But now on the other side, obviously the fraudsters are also very smart, and they also leverage this same technology. So I think that's going to be an interesting battle moving forward to see how that works out. But in the end, the only way to stop fraud is to stop selling, I always say, and that's not an option, obviously. So yeah, you have to make it part of your overarching, payment strategy, and it needs to be well connected inside in the organization and with the partners that help you out with it. Make sure that you stay within that bandwidth and have this fine balance between, selling, but also reducing costs resulting from fraud.
Moving back towards the sort of customer side on payments, obviously I was sort of covering the Asia event and the Asia region, and lots of the big trend that's emerging there are sort of omnichannel payments through apps, all those sorts of payments methods. So how do you see this playing out in the Americas region? Is this something that is developing at pace? And what sort of principles do need to be in place for omnichannel payments to hit the aviation industry there?
Yeah, omnichannel, I would say multi-touch point. You see more and more that airlines move into retailing, trying to maximize sales from every single contact point with the customer. So obviously at the start of the booking funnel, during the booking process, but also during check-in, during any changes to the booking, but also at the airport. If it's at the check-in desk, if it's at the backdrop, if it's in the lounge, even at the gate with upgrades, for instance, those opportunities play a bigger role, to monetize those, but also in flight. You see still, how airlines can, do they sell food and beverages? Do they accept mobile payments on board? And is it all part of, a centralized payment architecture with, for instance, payment orchestration? Because if it's all standalone, it would be very fragmented and becomes very messy. So you also have to zoom out and make sure that you have a single strategy across all these channels and all these touch points, and make sure that it all flows smoothly in a secure manner, right? So and that's definitely a challenge. There's definitely some room for improvement there, and obviously if you talk about Asia, where you have like WeChat, where you can actually inside the super app, check in, but also then, for instance, pay for an upgrade or pay for excess baggage. Those things are definitely in wallet and app heavy regions like Asia, very dominant. But there's many aspects that play a role, obviously, and it's typically, maybe it's the last couple of percent of the revenue, but it's definitely a bigger chunk of the complexity, and that's typically where the airlines struggle to wrap their head around that complexity.
Nice. And just to sort of wrap up, as I mentioned at the beginning, you're moderating the payments track at Aviation Festival Americas in June. Are there any specific conversations that you're looking forward to having at the event? Any challenges you're hoping to dig deeper into, and any specific speakers or leaders in payments that you're excited to hear more from at the event?
Yeah, obviously, the payment track itself and most of the topics, obviously, I'm involved in on a day-to-day basis. And I'm looking forward to welcome back Javier from Avianca, obviously. But there's also a sister or track on artificial intelligence, AI, and agentic commerce. And that's definitely something that I'm very interested in to see. Well, not to see, but to see, to find out what the impact of that will be and how airlines can organize themselves for this new channel, right? So it will be a bit of uncharted territory where we'll always find out, how this will work and what the roles will be that the individual stakeholders will play, and what it will bring from a commercial perspective as well, but also from a payment technology. And for instance, how about fraud? We already touched on that. How about chargebacks? I didn't do it. My AI agent did it for me. I'm not aware of it. So there's a lot of interesting angles there, and so I'm looking forward to that track as well, and looking forward to travel back to Miami.
Perfect. Well, hoping to see you there in sunny Miami in June. But that's all we've got time for today. So thank you so much, Paul, for hopping on and sharing your insights with us. It was great to get a bit of a preview of what we can expect later in the year. So thanks very much for joining me.
You're welcome.